The morning my daughter slid the folder across the kitchen table, I had been a widower for exactly 407 days. I'd been counting, not on purpose. It was just a kind of arithmetic that runs in the back of your head when the other side of the bed stays cold and you keep reaching for the lamp on her nightstand instead of your own. "Dad," she said in that careful voice people use on a man they think might break. "Wesley and I have been talking. We just want what's best for you." I remember the folder was the pale blue kind, the sort the bank uses. I remember the coffee was still good and hot, because Eleanor had taught me 30-some years ago to warm the pot first. And old habits like that don't die just because the person who taught them to you does. I remember thinking my daughter's hands looked exactly like her mother's, and how strange it was that I'd never noticed before, and how that small thing nearly knocked the wind out of me right there at my own table. What was in the folder, I'd find out, was the beginning of the worst stretch of my life since the funeral. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because you can't understand what these people did to me unless you understand who I was before they did it. My name is Russell. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a foreman at a parts plant outside Dayton, Ohio, the kind of place that doesn't exist anymore, where a man with a high school diploma and a strong back could buy a house and raise a family and put a little something away if he was careful. And I was careful. Lord, was I careful. My wife used to laugh that I'd reuse a tea bag until it turned to water gray. But that carefulness is the reason I owned my home free and clear by the time I turned 60, and it's the reason I'm telling you this story now. Because in the end, my carefulness is exactly what made me worth something to the people who should have loved me for free. The house. I have to tell you about the house because everything turns on it. It's a 2-story on Maple Hollow Road, white with green shutters, and I bought it in 1981 with a down payment that took us 4 years to scrape together. Eleanor and I painted every wall in that place ourselves. There's a mark on the kitchen door frame where I notched our daughter's height every birthday until she got too old and rolled her eyes at me, and I never painted over it. Not once, even when the realtor years later told me it'd show better without it. I dug the garden out back by hand. I built the porch swing the summer Hannah turned 9, and Eleanor and I sat on that swing most clear evenings for 30 years, sometimes talking, mostly not. When she got sick, it was her pancreas, and it took her fast, 11 weeks from the diagnosis to the end. She asked to be brought home from the hospital so she could die in our bedroom looking out at the maple tree we'd planted as a sapling. So I did that. I brought her home, and that's where she went. You understand now. The house isn't a house. It's the last room of my life that still has her fingerprints on it. After Eleanor passed, my daughter Hannah called every Sunday at 6. I'll give her that. She lives about 2 hours north with her husband Wesley and my granddaughter Madeline, who everybody calls Maddie. Maddie was 13 that year and the single best thing left walking on this earth as far as I was concerned. The Sunday calls were short, and they always ended the same way. Hannah saying, "You sure you're eating, Dad?" And me saying, "I'm fine, sweetheart," whether I was or wasn't. Mostly I wasn't. I'd lost about 18 pounds that I didn't have to lose. The freezer was full of those frozen dinners with the little compartments, and I ate them standing up at the counter because sitting down at the table alone was a particular kind of pain I couldn't always make myself do. My one real friend through all of it was Hank, who'd worked the line under me for 20 years and lived 3 doors down. Hank had buried his own wife back in 2018, so he knew the shape of the thing. We'd meet most mornings at Dottie's Diner on Route 9, take the booth in the back, drink too much coffee, and argue about the ball game and the government and whether the new fella running the hardware store knew a thing about plumbing. Hank never once asked me how I was doing, which is precisely why I could stand to be around him. He just saved me the booth. So that was my life. Small, quiet, a little gray like Eleanor's tea, but mine. Then came the folder. Inside it were brochures. Glossy ones, the kind with photographs of silver-haired couples laughing over a game of cards, of a manicured lawn and a sunroom full of plants. Whispering Oaks, it was called. A premier senior living community about 45 minutes from Hannah's place. And tucked behind the brochures was a single sheet of paper, a real estate listing agreement with my address typed across the top of it. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at my daughter. "You want me to sell the house?" I said. "We want you closer to us," she said. "Dad, you're rattling around in this big place all by yourself. You don't eat. You don't see anybody. What if you fall on the stairs? Nobody would even know for days." "Hank would know. Hank checks on me. Hank is 72. "So I should sell my home because my friend is old," I said, and I heard the edge come into my voice and I didn't try to stop it. Wesley spoke up then. He'd been standing by the counter the whole time with his arms crossed, the way he does, like he's a coach, and the rest of us are the team. "Russell," he said. He always calls me Russell, never Dad, never even a stab at it in 15 years. "Let's look at this practically. A place like Whispering Oaks runs about $5,000 a month. Now your Social Security plus your pension covers a good chunk, but not all of it. The house sells for, conservatively, $380, $390 in this market. You take that, you got the buffer you need, and frankly, you'd never have to worry about money again. It's the smart play." The smart play. He talked about the place where my wife died, like it was a hand of poker. "And the equity," he went on, "because Wesley is a man who cannot read a room to save his life. Instead of it just sitting there in a depreciating asset, we help you put it to work. We've got a guy who could." "That's enough, Wes," Hannah said, but soft, too soft. I told him I'd think about it. I said it because I wanted them out of my kitchen and out of my house, and they took the hint. And at the door, Mattie hugged me hard around the middle, the way she'd done since she was small, and whispered, "I don't want you to live in an old people place, Grandpa." And I held the back of her head and said, "Me neither, kiddo." And then they drove off, and I stood in my own front hall with the blue folder in my hand, and I'll tell you what I did. I sat down on the bottom step of the stairs my daughter was so sure would kill me, and I cried like I hadn't cried since the funeral. Not because I was scared of falling, because for the first time in my life I had done the math the way Wesley did. And the math said that to my own daughter's husband I had become a number. 380, 390 in this market. A depreciating asset with a man rattling around inside it. I'd like to tell you I stood up that night full of resolve and tore the listing agreement in half. I didn't. That's not how it goes when you're old and tired and lonely and the person asking is the only child you have left in the world. What I did was worse, in a way. I started to believe them. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about grief and about getting old. It makes you doubt yourself. I'd lie awake at 3 in the morning and think, maybe they're right. Maybe I am a burden waiting to happen. Maybe the kind thing, the unselfish thing, the thing Eleanor would want is to stop being so stubborn and let my daughter take care of me. I'd think about Mattie having to drive 45 minutes to see me. I'd think about the stairs. So a few weeks later, when Hannah called and asked, gently, if I'd at least come up for a weekend and tour Whispering Oaks, just to keep an open mind, I said, yes. God help me, I said yes. I want to be fair to my daughter, because this is my story and I could make her a villain. But the truth is more complicated, and the truth is what I owe her. Hannah is not a cruel woman. When she was little, she'd cry if I stepped on an ant. She brought me soup 3 times the week Eleanor was dying, real soup, made from her grandmother's recipe. And she held her mother's hand, and sang to her at the end, in a voice that broke my heart clean in two. She loves me. I believe that even now. But she married a man who taught her to see the world as a series of smart plays and dumb plays, and somewhere along the line my being alive and owning a house got filed under a situation to be managed. And grief makes people grab for control, because control is the one thing death takes from you completely. I think Hannah looked at me getting thin and gray in that house and felt the same terror I felt every morning at her mother's empty side of the bed, the terror of losing someone and being able to do nothing about it. Only her answer was to do something, to manage it, to get her hands on the wheel. I understand that now. I didn't understand it then. Then I just felt like merchandise. The weekend came, I drove up. Whispering Oaks was exactly like the brochure, which is to say it was clean and beige and smelled like a hospital trying not to smell like a hospital. A young woman named Brenda gave us the tour, and she had the practiced cheerfulness of someone selling timeshares. The rooms were small. The garden view room they steered me toward looked out on a parking lot with 3 shrubs in it. There was a common area where a TV the size of a barn door blared a game show at a dozen people in wheelchairs, and not one of them was watching it, and not one of them was talking to another. And I thought, this is where you go to be alone in a crowd. And I have all the aloneness I can stand in a house with a porch swing and a maple tree. But I kept my shut because Maddie wasn't there. She'd stayed at a friend's, and Hannah looked so hopeful, and Wesley kept nodding at the granite countertops like he was the one moving in. That night I stayed in their guest room, and around 11 o'clock I went down to the kitchen for a glass of water in my socks, quiet out of habit, and that's when I heard them through the door of Wesley's office. I'm not a man who eavesdrops. I want that on the record. But I heard my own name. And a man hears his own name the way a deer hears a twig snap. The second he signs the listing, we're golden, Wesley was saying. Brenda says they've got a wait list, but she can move 'em up. We get the house on the market by spring, peak season. We're looking at full ask, maybe over. I just feel terrible about the timing, Hannah said. It's barely been a year. That's exactly why now. He's vulnerable. He's not thinking straight. He'll listen to you. You wait 2 more years. He digs in, gets some lawyer, decides he wants to leave the whole thing to the dog. We move now. The money's there for Maddie's college, the deck, the whole back addition. Your dad set up at the Oaks, everybody wins. Don't talk about him like he's already gone. I'm not. I'm talking about him like he's a man who needs help, and we're the ones helping. You're the one who said he can't take care of himself. There was a silence. And then my daughter said the thing that I will carry to my own grave. She said, I know. I just wish he'd hurry up and decide. The not knowing is exhausting me. The not knowing was exhausting her. I went back upstairs. I didn't get my water. I sat on the edge of the guest bed in the dark for a long time, and I'll tell you, something in me that had been bent and bowed for 400, and however many days, something in me straightened up. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. It was a cold, clean feeling of finally understanding the deal that was on the table. I was not a father to be cared for. I was a problem to be closed. I was a depreciating asset they wanted to liquidate before the market turned and before I got smart enough to get a lawyer. Well, they were right about one thing. I got a lawyer. I left the next morning before either of them was up, wrote a note that said I'd forgotten a doctor's appointment, which was a lie, and I'm not sorry. Drove the 2 hours home with the radio off and my hands at 10 and 2, and my jaw set the whole way. When I came over the last rise on Maple Hollow Road and saw my house standing there white with its green shutters, the maple tree gone gold at the edges with the early fall. I had to pull over to the shoulder and just sit and look at it, because for the first time in over a year I knew all the way down that I was not leaving it. Not for Whispering Oaks. Not for the smart play. Not for anybody. I went to see a man named Gus Pruitt, an attorney in town who'd handled Eleanor's will. An old buzzard about my age with reading glasses pushed up on his bald head. I laid it all out for him. The folder, the listing agreement, the brochures, the conversation to the office door. Gus listened with his fingers steepled, and when I was done he took the glasses down off his head and cleaned them on his tie and said, "Russell, let me ask you something. Whose name is on the deed to that house?" "Mine, just mine, free and clear." "Did you sign anything? That listing agreement, anything they put in front of you?" "No." I told him I'd think about it. He smiled then, and it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who has seen this exact thing 100 times. "Then you don't have a legal problem," he said. "You've got a family problem. And those are worse, but they're cheaper to fix. Nobody can sell that house but you. Nobody can put you anywhere you don't agree to go. You're a competent adult who owns his own home. The whole thing only works if you keep saying yes." He leaned back. "So my professional advice, which I'm going to charge you for, is this: stop saying yes." I laughed, first real laugh I'd had in a year. But Gus did one more thing for me, and it turned out to matter more than all the rest. He helped me update my will and set up what he called my affairs, so that everything was clear and ironclad, no ambiguity for anybody to manage. And while we were doing it, he asked who I wanted as my healthcare power of attorney, the person who'd make decisions for me if I ever couldn't. I'd assumed it'd be Hannah. It's always the daughter, isn't it? But I sat there in that office and I thought about the not knowing is exhausting me, and I thought about Wesley's guy who could put my equity to work. And I said, "Can it be somebody who isn't family?" Gus said it could be anyone I trusted. "Then put down Hank," I said. "Hank Dolan, 3 doors down. He'll check on me, and he won't sell my house out from under me. And if I'm ever drooling in a bed somewhere, he'll have the decency to know I'd rather be home." Gus wrote it down, and I felt, for the first time, like a man making decisions instead of a man having decisions made about him. I drove home and I called Hannah that Sunday, 6 o'clock on schedule. "Dad, you left so fast Saturday, we were worried." "I'm not selling the house," I said. "I'm not moving to Whispering Oaks. I want to be plain about it so nobody has to keep wondering. The not knowing's over." There was a long silence on the line. I knew from the particular quality of that silence that she understood I'd heard something. A father knows his daughter's silences. "Dad, I love you, sweetheart," I said, "and I love that you want me close. But I'm going to live in my home, the home your mother died in, until I die in it too. And when that happens, the house and everything in it will go to you and Maddie, free and clear, and you can do whatever you want with it then, but not before. Not while I'm in it." That's not me being stubborn. That's me being your father. And then, because Gus had told me a man should always leave a door open even when he's shutting one, I said, "But I'd dearly love it if you bring Maddie down for a weekend. The leaves are turning. We could sit on the porch." She said she'd call me back. She didn't, not that week. I'd be lying if I said the next stretch was easy. The Sunday calls stopped for almost a month. Hank found me pretty low at the diner more than once. And being Hank, he didn't ask. He just slid the coffee over and said the bullpen was a disgrace. And did I see what they paid the new shortstop? Wesley, I learned later, was furious. Apparently I'd cost them a deck and a back edition, but here's the strange part. With the not knowing gone, with the decision made and the door shut and bolted, I started to come back to life. I can't fully explain it, but when you stop letting people convince you you're a burden, you stop carrying yourself like one. I started eating at the table again. I started fixing things around the house, replaced the gutters, sanded and restained the porch swing, got the garden ready for spring even though it was October, because a man who's planning for spring is a man who plans to be there for it. Dottie at the diner roped me into helping with the church food drive. And pretty soon I was driving a route on Thursdays delivering groceries to shut-ins, half of whom were younger than me. And I'd come home tired in the good way, the way I used to come home from the plant. I want to be honest about something, because I told you I'd be fair to my daughter. There were nights I sat on that swing alone and wondered if I'd done the right thing, if I'd been too proud. If I'd been too proud. If I'd traded my last years with my only grandchild for the privilege of dying in a particular bedroom. Pride is a hard thing to feed yourself with at 3 in the morning. What broke the silence was Maddie. She called me herself on a Tuesday on her own phone, which she was apparently not supposed to have. 13 years old. "Grandpa," she said, "Mom and Dad have been fighting about you and nobody will tell me anything and I'm not stupid. Are you mad at us? Are you sick? Are you going to sell the house? Brittany at school says her grandpa went to a home and now he doesn't know who anybody is." It all came out in a rush, the way it does at that age. And I sat down on the bottom step of my stairs, the killer stairs, and I told her the truth, careful and slow, the parts a 13-year-old can hold. That I wasn't sick. That I wasn't selling the house. That if Mom and I had a disagreement about where I should live, but that grown-ups have those. And it didn't mean anybody stopped loving anybody. That this would always be her house, too. The place with the swing and the height marks on the kitchen door frame. "Can I see the marks?" she said. "I don't remember them." "They're right where they always were," I said. "Come look." She was quiet a second. Then she said, "Grandpa, I have one from when I was 5. Grandma did it. There's a little drawing of a flower next to it. And I about lost it. 'Cause I'd forgotten that. But the second she said it, I could see Eleanor crouched down with the pencil, drawing that little flower while Maddie giggled and squirmed. "That's right," I said. "There's a flower." "I want to come see it," she said. So she came. Hannah drove her down that Saturday, and I want to tell you it was a tearful reconciliation on the porch, with violins playing. But life isn't a movie. Hannah was stiff and careful when she came up the walk. Maddie ran straight inside to the kitchen doorframe and found her flower and her 5-year-old height mark and started crying, this happy, sad crying that 13-year-old girls do, and that loosened something. We sat on the porch. The leaves were down to the last gold ones. And Hannah, looking out at the maple, not at me, said the thing I'd been waiting a year and a month to hear. "I heard you in the hall that night," she said. "I knew you heard us. I felt sick about it ever since." "I know." There, I didn't mean it the way it sounded. The exhausting thing. God, I don't even know how to say it. She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. After Mom, I just kept thinking, I'm going to lose him too, and I'm going to be standing in that hospital again, being able to do nothing. And I can't do that again. So I thought if I could just get you somewhere safe, somewhere I could see you all the time, I could stop it. And Wesley made it sound so reasonable, the money, the planning, and She stopped. I turned my own father into a problem to solve because I was too scared to just be sad about him. I'd had a whole speech ready, all the things I'd thought of at 3 in the morning. I didn't use any of it. I just reached over and took my daughter's hand, the one that looks exactly like her mother's, and I said, "You don't have to manage me, sweetheart. You just have to come sit on the porch sometimes. That's the whole job." She cried then, properly, and I put my arm around her the way I did when she was small and scared of thunder, and Maddie came out and found us like that and squeezed in between us on the swing, and the three of us sat there as the light went orange and then gray, not talking much, the swing creaking the way it's creaked for 40 years. And I thought about Eleanor, and I thought she'd have liked it, all of us on her swing, even if it took a fight to get us there. It's been about 3 years now since the morning of the blue folder. I want to tell you how it all settled, because the beginning of a story isn't worth much without the end. I'm still in the house. I'll be in the house when I go, and I've made sure of it, on paper, with Gus's help, so nobody has to do any managing. Hank's still 3 doors down, still saving me the booth, though he uses a cane now and gives me grief about the gray in my own hair. I still drive the Thursday grocery route. I planted that spring garden and 3 more after it, and I've got tomatoes coming up right now that Eleanor would have been proud of. Hannah calls on Sundays still, 6 o'clock, but the calls are longer now, and they're real. She comes down once a month, sometimes more, and she doesn't ask if I'm eating in that breaking glass voice anymore. Wesley and I have what you'd call a working peace. He still calls me Russell, but he built me a wheelchair ramp last summer off the back porch, just in case, for down the road. And he did it with his own hands over a long weekend and wouldn't take a dime for the lumber. And a man can change more in the doing than in the saying. So I've decided to let the past lie. And Maddie. Maddie's 16 now and has her own car and a license that terrifies all of us. And she drives down to see me on her own. No parrots. Just shows up some Saturdays with 2 milkshakes from a place she likes, and we sit on the swing and she tells me about boys I'm not supposed to know about and colleges she's thinking on. She wants to study nursing, wants to take care of old people, she says, but the right way, Grandpa, not the parking lot shrub way. And I had to look away when she said that, so she wouldn't see my face. Last week she measured herself against the kitchen door frame, standing up tall in her sneakers, and made me make a new mark with the date next to it, right above the one her grandmother drew the flower beside 11 years ago. 16 years of that girl, all up the side of my house. I'll never paint over it. They'll have to bury me first. People who hear this story sometimes ask me if I'm angry, looking back, at Wesley for the smart play, at my own daughter for the not knowing, being exhausting. And the honest answer is no, not anymore. Because here's what I learned at 68, that I wish somebody had told me at 38. The people who love you will sometimes try to manage you, and it will feel like betrayal. And the only cure for it is to stand up straight and remind them, and remind yourself that you are not a problem to be solved. You're a person to be sat with. On a porch. In the gold light. While the swing creaks the way it always has. I almost sold all of that for $380, $390 in that market. That maple tree outside my bedroom window is going gold again. I think I'll go sit on the swing,